fix that. That's all sorted. Yeah, I left the page I had open. I've sorted it now. But yes, so as long as it's fine now, that's the main thing. So yeah, this session is going to be a bit more serious than my previous sessions because they've mostly been about the D&D side of things. This one, meanwhile, this is the other side. This is the social justice side, and how it kind of relates to what I do. Because not only am I using D&D to fundraise to fight a slap suit against me by a former comedy writer, Graham Linehan, one of the writers for Father's Ted, not the funny one. Uh, but I do believe like D&D can actually be a great platform for exploring various different things. Some of you probably noticed by listening to me describe my previous worlds. I've tackled things from economic inequality, slavery, racial prejudice, LGBT plus issues. So I use D&D to talk about many different things, and I do think that you know games can be an escapism, but they're not just for that. But yeah, anyway, I also need to talk about some more serious topics, and that's really what I wanted to do here. This is something that I've been thinking about doing for a while, but I just haven't really got around to do because it's a little bit of a daunting task to approach. And that is the topic of what it was like growing up in a domestic violence refuge. Because, for those who may not know, my mum, my brother, and I were the victim of domestic abuse when I was about 5 or 6. And as a result, we were placed in a domestic violence refuge, and I spent a period of time growing up in the system, as it were. And this is something that I've mentioned before, that I've brought up. I've talked about it on my channel for quite a few years now. Each time I sort of like add more and more details. Like stuff happened in the refuge that, whilst I was fine talking about being in a refuge and like being put in one, I wasn't happy to talk about what happened in there. But that was more the negative things. I haven't talked about much else. For those who don't know, I was subsequently sexually assaulted in a refuge as well. So it's taken time to sort of like build up to these different stages of talking about my experiences because that's just life and that's just how it is. But I've seen recently that I've been sort of introducing my experience in discussion when it comes to safe spaces. This is particularly in relation to like trans people, for example, because whilst there's a lot of discourse about, the facts that demonstrably gender affirmative care is the only ethical course of action, another large topic of discussion when it comes to trans rights is about their place in spaces such as changing rooms, bathrooms, women's shelters, etc. Very recently we had this particularly horrific comic which was published. Actually, this was published in a UK newspaper, the Morning Star. And what it does is it portrays trans women as a crocodile slithering into a pond with some newts, claiming that they're transitioning into a newt. I should note that the Morning Star has apologised and stated that, oh, well, we don't know how we got past the review process, but the fact is the Morning Star has posted plenty of transphobic trash before. This is not new behaviour, and the idea that something like this not past review, it kind of sounds more like they're apologising for just the sake of saying sorry, because they got caught, not because they actually are sorry. I mean, they got slammed by Unison, which is the UK's largest trade union, over this. So again, it really came across as sort of insincere. So yeah, it's not the first time they've done shit like this. I doubt it will be the last. But that does sort of raise like interesting discussion, because one thing I find in any conversation where domestic abuse and refuges comes up, I have never talked to an anti-trans person about these things who themselves has been through that system. Every single time they're talking about things from a hypothetical perspective. They've never been through that. They've never felt what it's like to live off the map. And this is something I touched upon in a couple of tweets I put out, explaining that it is my lived experience. You know, oh, thank you for the donation. E has one or E has one. Is it E has or E has? But yes, thank you very much for the donation. It will go towards fighting Graham Linehan and their slap suit. So, thank you for that. So yes, and I lost track. But yes, I posted about the fact that it is my lived experience. It is my standpoint. Standpoint is a certain theory of feminism, which is like every person can sort of like, when it comes to certain types of prejudice or abuse or experience, listen to the people who have been through that. You know, if you want to look at domestic abuse, listen to people who have experienced domestic abuse. If you want to find out about racism, listen to people who've experienced racism. You know, it's kind of something that's important to intersectional feminism, but they're not intrinsically linked. But like, it's quite easy to bring them together, sort of thing. And I explained the fact that I've lived without an address to my name. You know, I grew up in that courtyard with like all my neighbours pitying me and all that, and so some people like showed an interest in that, and I thought, okay, well maybe it's sort of time I actually delve further into it. And I've got some questions from different people. One of which I came from Levi, and is actually relating to those couple of tweets I put out, which was, I grew up in a courtyard with glass-topped walls, and they just wanted to know what I meant by glass-topped walls. I don't know if you've ever seen like anti-personnel glass. It's really cheap and nasty, like hazard architecture sort of thing. On top of a stone wall, they'll cement pieces of broken glass stuck upwards. So anyone who's trying to climb over, so for example, a partner who's managed to track down their wife, girlfriend, etc., tries to climb over into the courtyard, they will, you know, they'll hurt themselves in the process. Ours were glass; they weren't barbed wire. Not that they were entirely effective, as as my mum and several of the others found out, because there was also a wooden section of the fence on one side, and yeah, that one was interesting because as a kid I found out that there was a plank low down, and I found if I pulled out that plank, I could roll out of the fence, follow this path, and just down the path, there was a park I used to go to as a kid. My mum had no idea that I was doing this, so one time I snuck out, and I found out I was being watched, not by an adult, because again, this area is supposed to be like a secure area for children, so like parents can leave their children, go away, and not have to worry about them. I snuck out, and then when I came back later, I found out I'd been watched, not by an adult, but by a younger child at the refuge. It was the child of a Muslim woman. The child had seen me pull the plank out, roll out. They were a couple of years old. They were like really quite a small toddler. Well, not a couple of years. They're probably about 4 years old. And they followed me. Now the thing is, on the other side of this wooden fence, there was like a really steep embankment, because it was like a dirt park through like a wooded area that led to the park, and at the bottom was just like, if you ever been to like a wooded area and you see like where water is gathered, it just turns to like very sticky, viscous mud. It's like that. I already knew to avoid it, so I used to walk along the embankment edge of the park. The little girl did not. sadly, she walked down to the bottom where she proceeded to get stuck, at which point my mum heard her crying from the other side of the fence, found her, and then came and found me. And they very quickly boarded that fence up. So, yes, that was my breakaway spirit back then. But, yeah, that's what I meant by glass topped walls. Like, there's this wooden stretch, and then there was also the stone walls. So it's like they just go for the wood walls. Hello, people. More people turning up, I can see. So, yeah. I guess we should probably go back to the beginning, and I got asked this question by Alexandria, and I'm saying people's usernames because these questions were all asked publicly. No one tried to contact me in private, so I'm guessing it's okay to read out the names. Yes, I kind of was in that regard. It's one of those stories that my mum likes to poke at me, sort of thing. So yes, Alexandria asked, when did you realise you were in a situation where you had to take refuge, or was that decision made for you? This person, of course, probably doesn't realise that I was 5 to 6 at the time, so of course it was made by my mother, but I know why she made the decision, so I thought, I could share that. Before the refuge, it wasn't my father. My mum and father had already gone separate ways. Before the refuge, we were staying with this man who my mum had met. He was very respectable, very upper middle class. He had a son who was in the military. I remember because they had the military outfit. Like parade gear. They had a photo of them in their parade gear, not like the actual in combat gear, but like the flat hat and all that sort of thing. Any chance you will make partner in the next 8 days? Not partner. I'm going for affiliate. But yeah. So I remember that about them. My mum thought like, when she first started dating him, like he was a really nice guy. I thought he was a really nice guy. He won me over very quickly. The way he won me over was Walking with Dinosaurs had just come out then, and we didn't have a cassette recorder. He did, so he recorded the Walking with Dinosaurs, the first 2 episodes, and then gave them to me whenever he'd come round to meet my mum. That was how she introduced us. The first time was after the first episode of Walking Dinosaurs, just so he'd have that like bribery. He seemed to get on with me and my brother. I remember the first few weeks with him, things were pretty amazing. He lived in a really lovely area, a lot of like fields and hills sort of thing. And after like the start period, it changed very suddenly, at least from my memory. The yelling started, then the screaming. It became a very regular occurrence at night. Eventually, it would go on. It would reach a point where, like, he'd allow my mum to come upstairs and look after me and my brother. And then one night my mum said she came up, and she can't remember whether it was me or my brother who said it, but one of us told her that we were so terrified that if she went back downstairs we wouldn't see her ever again. And that was the moment she said that like she clicked what was happening. It's a very boiled frog sort of experience. You don't realize it's happening until like something like that wakes you up and you sort of click. She contacted both my brother and my father, like explained to them the situation. They both came and got us. Mike's brother took him. Mike's father took him. My father took me. My father was actually supposed to be on a job interview for the RAF. He was supposed to be taking like an exam they typically do before they go on to a new post, because that's the thing. My father He left college with an art degree. He went to the RAF to get trained as an engineer. And I think the reason like he and my mum separated, it was a very amicable separation, the two of them. There was no like abusive or anything. It was just a case of, you know what, he wanted to keep going to like these really wide off posts because it paid well and it allowed him to establish a life. My mum wanted to settle down and like, have friends that she could keep for more than a couple of years. So they were just two different people looking for two different things. They separated. Like, I was born in Cornwall, where my dad was posted, and they'd met. For straight away, like about a year after I was born, moved up to the Shetlands. The Shetland Isles, which if you don't know, is an island between Scotland and Norway. That's like the full length of the UK. And I can't remember. I think they separated because I don't know if it was Gibraltar or the Falklands. And it was one of the two, and that was yeah. He was also going when this happened. He was also going for another like test to see whether he qualified for this new position that opened up. And he just blew it off. He blew it off. He came. He got me. Took me. My mum called the police, called the Refuge, and that's how we ended up in the Refuge. A couple of weeks later, I came back. And I remember asking my mum, like, what's going on with this change? Why are we, like, what's happened? And what she explained to me is that a refuge is a place that women with families can go if they don't have a lot of money. That's how she explained it to us. And we just accepted it at the time. And that's why I had memories of exactly what happened before then, and I knew exactly what a domestic violence refuge was in 2011 when I had a series of breakdowns over this. The thing is, my mind was just like refusing to connect the two facts. Like, you see a lot of movies touching on the sort of like psychological block that people have. That does actually happen. Like, you know the knowledge, and sometimes like you will talk about it and like say a flash of anger or something, but like your mind refuses to engage with it on a conscious sort of level. So yeah, we just accepted that. I actually remember our first day there. We made a mistake straight away. We were assigned a cupboard because it was a communal kitchen. What it was is there was a series of rooms. This was specifically a family refuge, so everyone in the refuge had children. We were assigned a cupboard in the communal kitchen, and I remember Mum had bought some. It's the multi-pack mini like Nestle cereals. And she put them in there, and next morning we wake up, go get breakfast sort of thing. So we went to get breakfast on our own, and we actually went to the wrong cupboard, who just so happened to also have the exact same like multi-pack. I don't know if they like given them when like they arrived there, or if it was just coincidence that they bought them. So we took them from them. Mum found out that we'd taken them from the wrong place, so she replaced it with a little note and everything. Like, sorry, my children just got like the wrong cupboard. It was a one room, but there was like a divider. So there was I'm trying to think about size. It was probably about an 8 by 6 foot like section. It was quite a reasonable size like area for Mum. And then there was like an archway. Kind of like the archway actually over there. It's kind of like just one of those archways, and then there was me and my brother's room on the other side of the archway, and that was like the layout for most of the rooms there. So yeah, and then we each had our own individual bathroom as well. Nothing fancy, but like good enough for everything. There was on the ground floor a communal living room, a communal kitchen. There was I'm trying to remember. There was also, I think, another like living area. Yes, because there was one living room which had like a sofa and like some banged up TV, and then there was like a more dining room experience that was built off the kitchen. Um, and then there was also a children's playroom, and off the children's playroom there was a psychologist office because we had a psychologist coming in every now and then to analyze how the children were playing and developing, something which I did not understand until much later. I just treated her as my friend. She was like a really nice person. I remember, like, she'd come in every now and then she'd like disappear for a while because I believe she also, in between coming in and giving the Refuge free therapy, like assessments for their children, she would also sometimes volunteer elsewhere. So there was like a 2 month period where she like disappeared for a little bit. I think she went to Africa or somewhere in South America. And then she came back. Yes, the nursing room, that's what they called them. Oh, I remember. I remember it had like the wooden block like train sets and everything like that. And I had the toy Godzilla, so I'd always just build a city and just destroy it. So I have no idea what my what the because I just remember she just used to sit in the corner, writing down. Um, there are some things that like I wish I knew what she thought about different things. For example, I was a big Godzilla fan. When my dad and my mom were together, they recorded 3 of the Showa Godzillas, and ever since I watched them as a kid, I was hooked. Godzilla versus Megalon, just the second half because they missed the first half, and like you couldn't record TV back then. Godzilla versus Gigan, and it was the Terror of Mechagodzilla. It's that 3 together, and I remember it really vividly because, of course, it has the commercials in between, and it had like the old Burger King commercials, which were like some guy like looking through a hole in the wall and seeing like a burger with like flames below it. But yeah, I remember having that as a kid, and then for one of my birthdays, my mum decided, I'd been gathering the cassettes since then, and my mum bought me a new cassette. Only she didn't realise that there were different eras of Godzilla, and I didn't realise it at the time either. For those who don't know, there's different eras of Godzilla. There's the Showa, the Heisei, the Millennium, and now there's like the contemporary era. And like the Showa era was like apart from the first one, every other movie is like really kid friendly. Like the Terror of Mechagodzilla's kind of got some heavy themes, ones which are completely removed from the American version, but still in the UK one I saw, like just suicide and POWs being killed. But like the tone of the actual film is still quite light. The Heisei era was terrifying as a child. And there was a scene I couldn't watch at the end of The Return of Godzilla where he's like coming over the volcano, and it's like the top of his head. He looks so fucking pissed off. So I drug the therapist up, asked her like, "Would you watch this with me?" Watched it. After that, I was fine watching it, sort of thing. So I was wondering what she was writing about that, and my mum's style to raising us, but yeah, that's just a case of like my mum doesn't realise there was a difference between the 2 eras of Godzilla and how child-friendly they were. But anyway, back to actually like experiences in the Refuge. Or questions, there's always questions. I do apologise if I'm meandering a bit, like I think this is just going to be one of those sort of sessions. Mr. Snarky asked me, do you feel you were given adequate guidance on how to cope with all the trappings the violent environment allotted? If you were given strategies to deal with anxiety, what were they? And they also added tough subjects, and I applaud your courage to discuss such a deeply emotional circumstance. And here's the thing. There were no follow-ups to this. Like, there was a person who assessed me, like my play, etc. Throughout my life, there were no follow-ups, even though there really like should have been. Like I know for a fact that my school knew that there were extenuating like circumstances to my various like behavioural swings, because I had this tendency to really like bottle up my negative emotions until they'd reach a point, and then I'd like violently outburst. I had a flawless record at school, except every now and then I would have this one day where I had this like really violent streak. Um, and the reason I know this is because, for those who don't know, um, I was preyed on by a child groomer in 2010, early 2011. Uh, you know, possibly easy prey because of what I've been through in my childhood. Because when you've been abused once, you fail to pick up on the signs. Um, and like, I contacted the police at one point, and the police turned up to my door. I'm still doesn't know what they turned up for. Um, yeah, and like they mentioned something that this had happened after I'd had my psychological breakdown. There's like several month period between like notifying the police and this happening. And like they mentioned something that let me know that like on my school record, because it wasn't like, oh, we done a like background thing on you and we know you've been through this. It was a case of like your school file made it clear that you've been through domestic abuse before. I was like, no one in like the school, whenever I was having these issues, ever approached me, ever discussed things before. I received no psychological therapy, support, or anything. There was an assessment, and that was it. That was just the assessment at the refuge, and once that was over, that was all. So yeah, that really did kind of piss me off, especially as at the time in 2011, you know, I was throwing and shitting my guts up because of anxiety attacks. I was being hospitalized because my airway collapsed from panic attacks. And people thought that I was having either a stroke or cardiac arrest. And even the ambulance drivers were like, okay, we need to take you and, get you checked up. And like, hey, maybe some of that could have been avoided had you guys actually like checked up on me like the years before. Where I was continually showing like these signs of aggression. But that never happened. So I guess there's no real way to sort of complain about that. Sort of leaning into this, JMM1233 asked, got the feeling being an orphan in social care for a time it was very similar in some respects. Having strangers dictate around you much more than your mum would do and always on constant supervision. No real contact with outside kids either. A lot of isolation, question mark. I'm not sure about the dictation, but the lack of contact with kids outside, definitely. In the refuge, it was the children at the refuge. And the way the refuge was structured, okay, and I'll say this for the refuge, fucking brilliant for like the parents that are there. The amount of support I saw for them and how they collectively like would take care of each other, sort of thing, that was amazing. But what someone didn't think about is the fact that when you create a refuge for families, what you are effectively doing is taking children from ages 1 to 17, some of whom have been beaten, screamed at, sexually assaulted, and you're placing them all under one roof, unsupervised. And like, I never had any friends home from school because we weren't really allowed to bring people in from the outside. I remember I had to have my birthday at, there's like this activity centre, it was called Treehouse in the UK. They had like several locations, different places in the UK. It's like an inside jungle gym where they had like a birthday party area. I had to have my birthday there because like, couldn't really do that in the refuge. So like, you couldn't really have children from the outside, and it was just a bunch of really fucked up children together. Like, the woman who got me to, she raped me and my brother, and I'd say she got me to sexually assault my brother, but like, no, she's the adult, she knew exactly what she was doing in the refuge. Like, she wasn't one of the mothers. She wasn't one of the parents. She was one of the children. Well, children when she got there. I think she was 18 at the time. Like, she had a younger sister and a mother there. They'd come to the refuge together. And like she was babysitting us, and under her watch, like, yeah, my brother was held down, and they got me to do stuff whilst like pretending it was a fucking game, you know. And it's like, for all the wonderful things that refuges do, and I do appreciate them, and I appreciate everything. I know my experience is not typical, and I hope that things have improved since then. But there needs to be actual hands-on addressing of problems, not just observation, because sometimes when a person, you know, when someone has been denied any control over their life, what they'll sometimes do is they'll sometimes try to take it out, like try to take that control back from other people. But they're not going to do it openly. They know technically it's wrong, because that's what the refuge exists as. So they're going to hide it, and they're going to take it out on vulnerable people. They're going to take it out on the people who can't speak, who can't, you know, who don't know it's wrong. And that's what happened. That was... so that no real connection with children outside. I don't know if that's why, as I grew up, I like have had problems like connecting with other kids, or if it's just a case of, you know, I don't know. There's a possibility that I am autistic. We don't know. I've never got assessed. But it's something that like it's been touched on with my current therapist. The possibility. I don't know if it's just like coincidence or if it is the result of that. But like it also wasn't just the refuge. Like before the refuge, it was a domestic abusive household in which she was very controlling about who could come and go. And before that, we were living in a tower block flat, like a Grenfell Tower, if you've seen Grenfell Tower. One of those sort of like apartment blocks. We were living there. And like my mum had to work full time. She was raising 2 children. Like my father always helped out with the money sort of thing, but she still had to be self-efficient. So like she couldn't like always take us out to different places and do everything like that. So yeah, that's probably there's probably a lot to read into that sort of thing. It's just like the continuation of being cut off in many ways. Yeah, the block flats, we did have a garden, and it was a communal garden in the back. Everyone was allotted a 1 by 8 foot stretch of land, and it was literally to hang up a washing line. I remember that year that I was in one of those blocks where it snowed, and I was so excited. And the girl downstairs that my mum was like paying to babysit me sometimes, or just like look after me sort of thing. Like I was like, oh, we need to go outside and play. And like I went outside to the backyard, and of course I couldn't do anything because if I ran in that garden, it would be only a matter of time before you fucking take your head off because you run into a fucking invisible washing line. Yeah. People know none of this because they hear the accent and they think, oh, you have a really posh accent, therefore you came from like a really affluent background, you were riding horses around the place. It's like, no, I was growing up in, first of all, a tower block, an abusive household, a domestic violence refuge, and then afterwards, straight into council housing. Yeah, that fucking takes you out. It really does take you out to run into a washing line. But yeah, it was kind of soul crushing as a kid. I remember that area around there. It wasn't any nicer. There's one park, and it was like, yeah, and little memories from like back then that like we share as a sort of family sort of thing. It's like my brother was so fucking happy one time when my grandmother visited, and she's Dutch. And the thing about the Netherlands is certain types of what we consider gambling in the UK aren't considered gambling in the Netherlands, including little scratch cards. Little scratch cards, perfectly fine for children. So she goes out and she buys me and my brother scratch cards, as she does. And my brother got the £5 back money. So from like the £1 scratch card, he got £5, which he could spend, and he was like so fucking happy about that. Like yeah, I should probably look at the other questions. If you have any other questions, by the way, do like mention it. Like do ask further questions. I've got one more here, and this came from Tara, and that was, where do you find the strength to keep fighting, to keep on your feet, when surrounded by so much hatred in this world? I admire you in that, and wonder if there's a trick to it, or you just grit your teeth and take it a day at a time. Thank you. Like, when I left the Refuge, I kind of entered this, like, it's almost disassociation. I used to disassociate a lot. I remember when I was at school, like, things didn't get easier. Bullying was a big thing. First, it started out with my interests, because here's the thing, like, in the flat, in the abusive household, and the domestic violence refuge, pretty much all I had was to go outside and play with children of all different ages, many who didn't get along, do that, or watch TV. And I can, like, I can give lines from David Attenborough's, I can't remember the name of the series though, was it Life in Warm Blood, the mammal series? I can still remember some of like those scenes line by line, because I used to watch it so damn often. We rented it from the nearby library, and it was just, yeah. So I kind of entered this haze world. When I'd go to bed, I was really plagued by nightmares. Oddly enough, like transformative nightmares, so things like werewolves, and I wonder if that has anything to do with like this idea that a person can become a monster, a loud, aggressive, angry monster very quickly. And what I used to do is like, I used to, when I go to bed, I'd end up like laying awake for a couple of hours after I'd go to bed each night. Very often I'd just plug in, I had a CD player, my grandparents got me one Christmas, and I'd like find the like happiest like tunes that I could sort of find. I'd plug that in, listen to those tunes, and I just weave this world for myself. And yeah, like I bring in like different areas from my childhood, and I just sort of stitch them randomly together. So for example, there was a part of like this island that was based on the Dinotopia. There was part that was based on like Pokemon sort of thing. I was not the ruler, oddly enough. I was not the ruler. That was actually Lara, the goddess reborn from Summoner 2. Lahara. Sorry, that should be... because, like, my brother got Summoner 2. I don't know what, I just really likes the character of her. She was a queen in the game Summoner 2. Summoner 2, by the way, has, like, affected my D&D gaming style so much, because as I grew up, I actually played further into the game, and actually, like, learned a lot of world building stuff from it. And she was just a ruler. I was just like their friend, and I just like went on like these self-created adventures. So you know, I sort of do that. But when 2011 came around and I went to school, I was already starting to become disillusioned by various things. I'd been kicked out of the furry fandom for whistleblowing a sexual predator. I'd come out as bisexual and received a hell of a lot of bullying about that. I was keeping the facts that I was trans, like closeted, because I just couldn't talk about that. So I was already on the edge and disillusioned, which is why perhaps some of my defences that I'd had all these other years were sort of torn down. Then came around 2011. We have an assembly. This assembly will discuss domestic abuse. Oh, well, that doesn't affect me. I'll be fine. Yeah, I came in... I went home that day feeling ill. Went home early. Oh, thank you, Faithless South, for your donation. It is much appreciated and goes to Fighting Graham. So I went home that day feeling ill, came in the next day, um, made it through the first session, the first lesson, at which point my tutor, my sociology tutor, called me aside, and yeah, asked me what was going on, and I just broke down, and I started like yelling, like, why do they think that they can portray this? Why do they feel okay doing that? Like I wasn't getting the point, like what they were trying to do. Like they're actively trying to get out information on how to support it, but I saw someone tearing down the last of my defenses, and I responded to that aggressively. Um, yeah, and from that day on, I became super serious. Like if you ever wondered why I have no chill, why I go from 1 to 10 in like 5 seconds flat the moment I feel like something is problematic, that is why. They actually had a name for me in university because I was seen as so stern, so serious, because suddenly I'd gone from, you know what, college is so damn carefree, you know, my lessons are what I love, I can go out at lunch and get food from somewhere, I'm starting to get disposable income because my dad, even though he no longer had to pay my mum, decided, you know what, whilst he's in education, I'm still going to continue to pay you the same as we agreed upon when we separated. And she decided, you know what, you're going to university in a couple of years. I'm actually going to put like a little bank account for you, so you can learn how to like look after yourself, sort of thing. So I was so damn carefree. Like those first couple of weeks were the best weeks of my life at education. Um, and then suddenly I was having to map out every toilet in the building anytime I went somewhere because I didn't know if I was going to throw up or shit myself. Um, I was having my airway collapse. I was, dealing with these thoughts, and it was this was gonna happen. It was not a great theatre of life. Oh, I'm an ugly cry. um, yeah. Suddenly I was having to take responsibilities that I didn't like. Anytime I had a presentation or something, like my fight or flight would be hyperactive, um, and the only way that I could do it is if I like, pretty much the same thing you do if you're a bottom and preparing, take Imodium several hours ahead of things because like it just sticks your stomach together, sort of thing. And Imodium is not exactly cheap either. And it was like I always need to get the Imodium instance because sometimes just riding the bus in, you know, I'd always be early to the bus. The way the bus went, it kind of came past my house, went to where my old school was, looped back round, came past the same stop, and continued onwards. And I was like, okay, you know what? I want to get down and sit down on the bus because by the time it comes past me again, the bus was so full and I just didn't like standing up. So I get on it early, and what would happen is I'd get on, I'd be talking to some of my school friends from school, and then psych would just like set me off. And by the time I came back to where my house was, I'd just be getting off because I felt like I was going to throw up or shit myself. So I started taking Imodium Instance like near daily. Anytime I organised anything, I had to hammer out every single detail down to like the smallest thing. And it's just like, I was so happy and looking forward to having this more relaxed period where I had more control over my life. Yet I still didn't have this like overload of responsibilities. And that was taken away after a couple of weeks of it. And by the time I got to university, I had, you know, not by the time I got to university, when I went to university, by the time I met Yudita in the second year, I had a nickname at uni. It was 20 going on 50 because of how I acted with everything. You know, I found it very hard to just relax and be myself. Oh, yeah. There's actually, snarky, there was actually a point. This is when, for those who don't know, Irita is Indian, that's why we live in India. Met her in the second year. Her course was 1.5 years. So she finished as I was halfway through my placement year. So I still had half a year placement and then my dissertation year to go. She went back. The moment she went back, the support structure I built with her, that disappeared. And I reached such a bad place that I was actually going through the process of dropping out of university. I actually started writing out the documents when my personal tutor found out, sat me down, and like explained to me like these are the things we're going to do to get you support so you don't do this. And then he opened up very personally about the facts that he is a gay man, went through like very similar experiences, and he actually did drop out of university. It was the biggest regret of his life. He came back, he worked his way through it again, and then got his PhD later down the line. So he was like, I'm going to fight to like keep you in, sort of thing. I did get extenuating circumstances in the end, just to help me out. So yeah, it's just the reason I have the strength to stand up and fight this is because that has been my life the past 9 years. It doesn't get easier, it just gets numb. You just sort of get numb to it. Like you always, yeah, you always, as Mr. Snarky says, you're always fighting. When you've got all that on your shoulders, you can't sort of just accept how others are going to mistreat you. So like, I started putting my foot down, and with that, that's just how I became this way. Like, when I got a sense of right and wrong, and when I got a sense of, something that could harm someone, I knew that it didn't have to be physical violence against that person to hurt them. I was never punched. I was never hit. Me and my brother were never hit or punched. But it still had a fucking impact on us. Like, people who say that violence just refers to physical violence are like fucking the scum of the earth, who have absolute no fucking knowledge about just how much emotional violence, economic violence, political violence, all these other forms of violence, like how it can affect you. And it just, yeah, and that's why I refuse to take it lying down, because Adita's doing something. 1 second. Just gonna blow my nose quickly, and I'm sure you don't want to hear that. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question. Like, younger me would have crumbled at that. Like, any sort of confrontation, younger me would crumble. Apart from these periods where my negative emotions boiled over and I'd lash out. And like, that might sound like strength, but it wasn't. That was just pure fucking rage. The way I describe it, and it still affects me to this day. Abuses and microaggressions and all these sort of things just build up and build up and build up over time. It's a lot like static building up on a Tesla coil, before it finally launches out and hits the nearest thing. It doesn't matter if that nearest thing was the cause of it. Like, whichever person is just unlucky to add the final drop of water, to put the final bit of weight on, they're the ones who get the full brunt of everything you've sort of, kept bottled up, sort of thing. And I mean, I do have problems with my anger, and I'm working with a therapist to resolve those things. But what's very funny is that everyone who ever tells me to, like, go see a therapist, you clearly have anger issues, I go over the examples of what happened with my therapist, and they're like, yes, you need to be angry, but you need to be angry in this way, not raw rage. You need to temper your anger. Like, I was explaining, like, with the whole secular community and that, and Ipsa was talking about how, okay, why do you fight these people? Well, because, like, my community. Okay, is your community something worth fighting for? Well, yes, it gives me support, structure, and everything like this, and it gives other people, all these things as well. Right, so why is your anger unreasonable? My therapist has never once, like, told me that my anger is unjustified, but again, we're working on how to temper that response and put into more, like, productive things, like hate recording. I do hate record. Yeah. You didn't jump when you heard the noise. I am always tensing up at unexpected noises. Is it something you had to overcome, or was it just never a problem for you? I could hear her washing in the background, so I kind of expected it to come eventually. But there are noises that scare the shit out of me. One of them is walking along the hallway very fast when I have the door closed. Not so much here, because here we have marble floor, so you can't really hear it. But like in Norway, where it's like wooden floors, in the UK, where it's wooden with carpeting, my mum is a very fast walker, and my door is by the stairs. So when she's going downstairs from her bedroom, she walks by. And she is Dutch. She is a very fast walker. She walks with determination. As with my father, he's just a heavy walker, and again, there's no carpeting on those stairs. Again, bedroom, by the stairs there. And the moment I hear someone walking fast or walking towards me with the door closed, I panic. Like, yes, the dogs are back. My heart goes into my chest, I panic, and I just tense up. Door slamming does get me. It's just, I knew she's washing, so yeah. I've also, today, I had a bottle on here, and it fell off onto the marble floor, and it fell off onto the cap, which is like the hardest bit. That scared the hell out of me. But again, it's just because I heard her washing. So yeah. Which is the thing, I am a fast walker, so I know, like, my mum's just walking because she always walks fast, because it's how we are. Like, she used to work as a dinner lady when she got a job as a dinner lady, I think, in the Refuge, and continued it as we're out of the Refuge. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, everyone thinks that I'm really posh. It's like, no, I was eating the posh kids' leftovers because she worked at a grammar school as a dinner lady. After that, she got a job as a post worker, which for a Dutch person is about as great a job as she could really get. She loves to walk. In summer, it's her favourite thing to do. Not a big fan of it, like when it's raining in autumn, etc., autumn, spring, but like she's fine with it. But yeah, she really enjoys her job as a post worker now. So yes, there was another question I did save, but I gotta find it quickly. I see the mirror is covered today. Now, how are we going to warn you about a detour or monkeys? Yeah, I just decided to cover that to see how it would affect the lighting, and it just seemed to, yeah, it seemed to work. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I was born in Cornwall, moved straight to the Shetland, and there are certain words where the accents do come in because I have certain words that I've picked up like certain ways of saying it. My dad's actually from Middlesbrough. He was born in Redcar. So I do not sound like any of my family. Um, like with my granddad, he has a brother and I think there's three sisters, and they all live within a stone's throw of each other. They've reached that age where slowly they are, yeah. Two of them even live next to each other. Like they took down the fence between them on their front drive, so they could just walk across the driveway to each other. But yeah, so it's like my grandfather and subsequently my dad and uncle have like totally thrown everything. Like no one has left Middlesbrough except for them in their family. So yeah. So yeah, are there any more questions? I mean, one thing I guess I can talk about is what happens after the refuge, because like a lot of people don't sort of know what happens after the refuge. And it's like, at least at the refuge we were at, what happened is my mum, like decided, what, she's going to move out, moved out, and what she got is we moved into council housing. We were of course given priority. Mum, two children, and also the refuge gave her a pack to go with her, and in this pack were like coupons that she could use in certain furniture stores. It's like a donation thing they give. They say, oh, we donated like so much to Refuge, for example, so she could go use it in those stores. The council, with the council house, also gives her the same to like do up the house. When we got to the council house, there was the carpets were all going to be torn up, and she could use coupons to replace it. And she was like, actually, these carpets aren't that bad. Can you like keep the carpets, and can I use the coupons and other things? And she actually managed to convince them that yes. So she spent the money that she would have spent replacing the carpet on, I think it was getting a tumble dryer, which she still has to this day. And I've actually got a part of that pack today. It is helping me make videos in 2020. And this is a pack she was given turn of the millennium, 2001 sometime. I forget the date when I haven't looked it up for a long time. And it was, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it that well. Sorry for the motion sickness. Okay. I don't know if you can see that on the windowsill. There is a duvet. That is just a duvet hanging there. That is a massive king-size duvet. That was what she was given by the refuge. And she was looking to get rid of it because I changed that. She's had it for 20 years. So she was looking to get rid of it, and we were coming back to India, and Mum was like, oh, do you want to take this? I was like, well, yeah, I mean, we got thick blankets for winter, but you know what? I'm a video recorder. Like I do a lot of sound stuff, so I've got sponge on the walls. So you know what? I'll take the duvet, and I'll use it to cover something. Godless Iron, do you think that living in India has helped you in dealing with your past, being that far away from these things occur, where these things occurred, might have been beneficial in my mind to some degree? Well, there's a lack of wooden flooring, so that's been beneficial. Not exactly. I don't know if coming here has been beneficial. I mean, being with Adita, that is a great benefit. Adita's been through plenty of shit as well, so we kind of get each other. We kind of understand each other. We know that when we have problems, when we say some things, very often, it's not us. It's a failure to cope with things, and we're both very good in helping each other. But yeah, moving here, not exactly so much. I mean, I guess one thing is it has helped me afford a therapist. You know, therapists in the UK are very expensive. You get so many sessions with the NHS, but it's not enough. I remember studying this in psychology. We did like we studied the different therapies for psychology, and I remember I think you get about half or a third of the total sessions that you typically need to have any sort of like breakthrough on average. Which for some people, fine, but for the vast majority, really isn't enough. And like you get those many free sessions, and then you start paying out of pocket. Yeah, there's also long waiting queues. I haven't really used it. Like again, no one really gave me that sort of support. I saw a counselor a couple of times at college when I first had my breakdown, and then I just kind of like avoided the issue. Then I went to university, and it was the university counselor at university NHS. They gave me sessions, and they were a massive help. And that's that. My personal tutor put me in touch with them. By the way, when I say personal tutor, I don't mean a person who like tutors me personally. Personal tutor is just like you have your class tutors that teach you like the different modules, and then every student is assigned a personal tutor. So they have like a whole load of students in each year that they're responsible for, sort of thing. So yeah, like personal tutor put me in touch with them. So yeah. So like I can afford it over here. That's one of the good things. Yeah. Yeah. I swear there's more things that I'm forgetting about that I wanted to talk about, but I just can't remember. I'm just drawing a blank. I did write some stuff, so I'm just going to take a quick look over my notes. No, I got to the start, I got to the questions, and that was it. I was supposed to write more things for me to talk about, but then again, yeah. I think I've covered a lot, and I'm sorry if it's been a bit of a mess and a bit more up and down. Yeah, that's there is something like I remember two of my experiences now. Yes, I wanted to talk about some positive things about the Refuge, because as you're a child there, you will have some positive things as well. I nearly scared someone to death, I remember that. I had this rubber snake, and it was very realistic. I got it for, I think, my birthday. It was like a very realistic rattlesnake with its mouth like wide open, ready to strike. And I was playing outside with it as a kid, as you do, and I left it out. And because it is a green snake laying on grass, I didn't like notice it to pick it up later, and so the grass just grew up around this snake. Fast forward, some of the chores were divided between the people who lived there. Like some stuff they'd have staff come in, other stuff was like divided between the people who lived there. Like keeping the there's this like grass area mowed was one of the jobs. So I came home from school from that day, and my mum had this like she could she could barely stop laughing. So yeah, turns out, and she handed me my rubber snake. And it wasn't like I played with it as a kid. It wasn't like my, oh my god, this is this is like my most important toy. But it had like a gash in it now. It had a cut. And my mum sat me down and explained to me, and she's retold this story many times, of how the other woman, I believe it was a lesbian in the Refuge, how she'd been out mowing the lawn when dun, 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 the mower had just stopped. And so she started turning over, she unplugged it, started turning over, and this snake head dropped out with its fangs like open, ready to strike. Oh, she never ran so fast in life, apparently. The rest of the adults are talking about how like she came in like yelling that there was a snake caught up in the lawnmower, and of course it turned out to be this rubber snake toy that had just been left there. Another thing, I don't get like why parts of like the building had glass on top. I think it's because like there are parts that can't really be seen from like the windows, etc. Uh, but there was like one part right at the front, which is of course where everything's like looking out onto. So if anyone were to come that way, you could see it. Where it would go down a little bit. And one thing I should note: the building was, you know, here it had forest behind it, forest on one side. It then had like a long car park in front of it and bungalows on the other side, and they were all elderly bungalows. I think it was some sort of government scheme, like retirement bungalows or whatever, like left over from ages ago. And we had an elderly couple live next to us, directly next to the refuge. And there was this one bit of the wall that came down as it came to a gate that led out onto this car park street. It was like way away from the main road, like a sea of these bungalows. And the elderly couple would talk to us and would be like really, really kind to us and all the other kids in the refuge. And they'd like do things like they'd give us a pound or two, so we could go to the local shops and stuff. And like, I just thought like all old people were like that, and I didn't realize until afterwards that like the elderly people in the area must have been informed to some degree, or must know to some degree, that this is a domestic violence refuge. So like, what they were doing for us is kind of probably like you know, they probably felt bad that part of our childhood has sort of been taken away. So complete random strangers, we just like said hello to and be nice to a few times. They were always lovely to us, sort of thing. I remember one time they had frog spawn. They had a little pond in their little garden in front of their place, and they had frog spawn, and they were like, "Oh, do you guys want to come collect it?" And of course, all the kids in the area wanted to go get some, so we all got some. And then someone left their frog spawn on the kitchen counter. Big smash downstairs one day, and big smash downstairs one day. One of the parents had accidentally knocked the frog spawn, and like the floor, the communal kitchen floor, was just covered in green pond water and frog eggs. It's just, so yeah, that was funny. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of things really. And again, I guess it's probably a good sort of place to end, really. But bringing it back to my main point, trans women are not a threat. Like, sure, a trans woman can be a predator, just like anyone else can really be a predator. The man who abused my mum, they were a predator. I think that's why he clinged so much onto a woman who, single mother, 2 children, and the way he kept her for so long was he undermined her confidence. It fed her the narrative that no one else would accept a single mother with children. And then of course the cis woman in the refuge was also a predator. Everyone can be predators. Trans women are no exceptional threat. They're just women, and they in fact face a lot of abuse, and they need protection. Like, I know what's coming. There's going to be the argument, oh well, what if including trans women in a refuge makes, you know, this and that bigot feel uncomfortable? Okay, well, there was also a lesbian in our refuge. A lesbian who, by the way, helped a mother at the refuge discover that she was actually bisexual, which, lovely story. We stayed in touch for many years. Well, my mum did. I think she still meets him now and then. There was this heterosexual mother who turned up there with a little girl, very good friends with the little girl, and there was this lesbian who was like quite open about it. They'd escaped their partner, Um, and like they ended up leaving together. They ended up falling in love. The heterosexual woman ended up discovering that actually she's never thought about it before. She ended up leaving, and I think they remarried. I think they married. Well, I think they probably got a civil partnership at the time. I haven't been in touch with them recently, but I remember going to their new place, after we all left the refuge, and with the girl playing on a pogo stick behind the house. They also had a kitten, which was exactly like our cat was when he was a kitten. We got a cat when we left the refuge, and then later on they also got an Alsatian who was an absolute coward. Like, you know, they were so, yeah. Like, but think about it. You could make the exact same argument that you're making towards trans women about lesbians. You know, I'm pretty sure some homophobic bigots are not going to want lesbians to be in a refuge. Oh, well, that's different. Why is that different? And the only way that leaves you is, well, trans women are men, when no, they're not, they're women. You know, you want to start excluding women from women's services. No, that's not going to happen. It doesn't matter whether you're a racist and you don't want black and Middle Eastern women there. It doesn't matter if you're a homophobe and don't want bisexual and lesbian women there. It doesn't matter if you're a transphobe and don't want trans women there. You know, they're women. They need to use women's services. And yeah. So those are the thoughts of someone who's actually lived inside a domestic violence refuge. We need to stop pretending like it all comes down to chromosomes and genitals, because, as my example shows, when you completely ignore half of the picture, it's the children that suffer. So yeah, kind of a heavy note to end on, but yeah, I think that is I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. So thank you all for turning up, and thank you all for being with me here. I know it's been a heavy topic, and if you feel touched on by any of the topics today, do know my inbox is open. Also, please, if you need to get help and support, do get it. There's nothing shameful about getting support. I'm in therapy, Adita's in therapy. We're very open about this. It's not a case of we're in therapy to get fixed. It's we're in therapy. This is probably going to be an ongoing process until the day we die. So yeah, like, get help. There's nothing shameful about it, and support others. So thank you all for listening, and I guess I will see you all. Sorry, I've got to get the dates right. It's the Friday the 6th, isn't it? Yes, Friday the 6th at 7:30 Universal Coordinator Time, also known as Greenwich Mean Time. That will be Monsterless Park. That's a linear one-shot, lampooning Jurassic Park, as you can probably tell. That should be interesting. Then, the following night, same time, 7:30 UTC, it will be the Terror of Dragon. More classical D&D experience. The party will be turning up at a seaside village and investigating happenings in said village. And then the day after, we've actually got a load of interviews, and I should get the interview list up. I should also get my Patreon list up, because this video is going to be repurposed. I have actually recorded the next Graham Linehan video. I just haven't had the time to edit it with everything that's going on, and the audio is slightly annoying. But yes, I need to go to Google Drives, do I not? Google Drives, interviews. So yes, this is Sunday at 1 o'clock UTC. That is, that's 1 p.m. UTC, which is 8 a.m. Eastern Time, or 6:30 my time. I will be interviewing Erin Green. Erin Green is an American trans woman. She was part of the atheist community of Austin until everything that happened there. We were discussing how things are shifting in the US, the various gains and the various ban laws that have been going out in relating to trans people. So that'll be going on for an hour. I've actually got an open slot after that. The next interview is at 3:30 UTC GMT. That is. Oh, sorry. No, sorry, that's 4. Sorry, that is 4 p.m. UTC GMT, which is 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be interviewing Val from the Friendly Atheist. Val was also threatened with a lawsuit by Graham Linehan. We're discussing things about trans rights in Canada and various other issues. Then it is 5:30 UTC and GMT, 12:30, so half past lunch Eastern Time. We'll be interviewing Katie Montgomery. Again, another person Graham has threatened, this time about self-care, when and when not to engage with transphobes sort of thing. Then at 7 p.m. UTC GMT, and that is 2 Eastern Time, it will be Casey Explosion. I'm sure many of you know Casey Explosion. We'll be discussing, things in Ireland, Graham Linehan, their experience with everything such as the Mermaids charity stream. I will share the spreadsheet as well. Then at 8:30 p.m. GMT UTC, that is 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be interviewing Glade, and we'll be discussing things about hiding parts of one's identity in order to avoid flack, and sort of the way policing identities within the LGBT plus community has resulted in some rather sad things. And then last of all, at midnight UTC GMT, which is 7 p.m. Eastern Time, it will be Levi, who I believe is hanging around in the chat. There is a spreadsheet. I will share the public links so you can go check stuff. I'll also be sharing in the video this will be uploaded to. This video will not be available on Twitch. I will be uploading it up to YouTube because I want to have it there. I'll put the link down there as well. So yes, that just leaves one last thing, and that is to say thank you to all of my Patreon sponsors, starting with Gerrit Van Vorst, who just came out of nowhere this month and decided that, they enjoyed my content, so they're going to pay a backlog. So they've paid what they just gave me a lump sum and said, I'm paying for your backlog because I've been enjoying your catalog so much. And yeah, that was just like out of nowhere. So I thought, okay, well, this month I've kind of got to mention their name as well. On top of that, we'd also like to thank Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Soraya and Katie, McGay, Wellington Marcus, Alice5, and Sosh Daniels. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you for listening, and remember to D&do your bit.